I said to my daughter, "Is your husband and his family coming for Christmas?" She replied, "It's just 19 people." I added, "Perfect. Then I'm going on vacation and you're in charge. I'm not a babysitter and definitely not an employee." My daughter went pale, but the real surprise was still coming. See, for 23 years, I'd been everyone's unpaid servant. This Christmas, they'd learn exactly what I was worth when I wasn't there to save them. The November wind rattled against my kitchen window as I stood at the sink, scrubbing the last of the Thanksgiving dishes. My hands, worn and weathered from 65 years of life, moved automatically through the sudsy water. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of my annual Christmas preparation marathon, a tradition that had somehow become my sole responsibility over the past 23 years. I'm Anne, by the way, just a retired elementary school teacher who somehow became the default holiday coordinator for my daughter, Sarah's impressive in-laws, the Thornton family. When Sarah married Marcus Thornton fresh out of law school, I thought I was gaining a son. What I actually gained was an entire aristocratic clan who viewed my modest 3-bedroom ranch as their personal holiday resort. The Thorntons were old Connecticut money, the kind of family where the men became judges or surgeons, and the women sat on charity boards. Marcus's mother, Patricia, could trace her lineage back to the Mayflower, a fact she mentioned at least once every Christmas dinner. His father, Judge William Thornton, had a way of looking around my home as if he were mentally calculating its worth and finding it lacking. My late husband Frank used to joke that we were running a bed and breakfast every December. He'd help me move furniture to accommodate the crowd string lights on the enormous 12-foot tree they expected, and sneak me supportive winks when Patricia made her subtle digs about my quaint decorations or simple cooking. But Frank had been gone for 5 years now, and with him went my last ally in the holiday circus. The transformation happened gradually. The first year Sarah married into the family, she helped enthusiastically. We'd shop together for ingredients, laugh over recipe mishaps, and stay up late wrapping presents. By year 5, she was arriving just hours before the guests, claiming her law practice at Thornton and associates kept her too busy for preparation. By year 10, she designated herself as the coordinator, which meant she told me what everyone wanted while she supervised from the living room with a glass of wine. Marcus, despite being raised by a woman who probably never touched a dish sponge, somehow believed that domestic work was encoded in female DNA. He'd pat my shoulder and say things like, "Anne, you're such a natural at this," while he retreated to watch football with his brothers. The most he'd ever contributed was carrying in the folding chairs from the garage, and even then, he acted like he deserved a medal. This year would mark the 23rd Christmas I'd hosted for the Thornton clan. 23 years of Patricia arriving in her fur coat, handing it to me like I was the coat check girl. 23 years of her sisters-in-law comparing my table settings to the ones at their country clubs. 23 years of the children, now teenagers, treating my home like a hotel where they could leave towels on the floor and dishes wherever they pleased. I'd calculated it once during a particularly lonely evening last January. The groceries alone cost me around $3,000 each Christmas. The extra electricity for all those twinkling lights Patricia insisted upon. The water bill from endless loads of dishes and laundry. The new decorations I bought each year because last year's were suddenly dated. Not once had anyone offered to contribute financially. After all, wasn't it an honor to host the Thorntons? My kitchen timer beeped, pulling me from my thoughts. Time to check my planning notebook, the same one I'd used for over 2 decades. Each page meticulously detailed shopping lists, cooking schedules, and seating arrangements. I'd learned to track dietary restrictions like a hospital nutritionist. Marcus's sister, Caroline, was gluten-free. His brother James's wife had gone vegan. The youngest nephew was allergic to tree nuts. Patricia claimed a lactose intolerance that mysteriously vanished when dessert arrived. I flipped through the pages, each one a monument to my invisible labor. Prime rib for 24 people, homemade rolls, 3 kinds of potatoes because heaven forbid someone's preference wasn't accommodated. 7 pies because Patricia once mentioned that variety is the hallmark of a proper hostess. My back twinged just reading the lists, a reminder from my doctor about the repetitive strain from all those years of holiday preparation. As I reached for my phone to start ordering specialty ingredients, it buzzed with a message in the family group chat. My blood ran cold as I realized I'd been accidentally included in a conversation meant for Thornton eyes only. Patricia had written, "I do hope Anne manages better than last year. That stuffing was practically inedible." Caroline chimed in, "At least we only have to endure it once a year. Thank goodness for the country club the rest of the time." But it was Sarah's response that stopped my heart. "I know, but the free venue and catering make it worth tolerating. Where else would we fit everyone without spending a fortune?" Free venue, free catering, tolerating. The words echoed in my mind as I set down my phone with trembling hands. 23 years of love poured into every dish, every decoration, every moment of making their Christmas magical, reduced to something to be tolerated. I was nothing more than free labor to them, including my own daughter. I walked slowly to my bedroom and opened the closet where I kept Frank's things. His Christmas sweater still hung there, the one with the ridiculous reindeer that lit up. He'd worn it every year just to make me laugh. What would he think if he knew how they talked about me? What would he say about his little girl treating her mother like hired help? They didn't even have to pay. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through possibilities. For the first time in 23 years, I questioned why I was doing this. Why was I spending my retirement savings to feed people who mocked me behind my back? Why was I destroying my health to create magic for those who saw me as nothing more than convenient? As sleep finally took me, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. This year would be different. This year, they would learn exactly what Anne the servant was worth. They just didn't know it yet. 3 weeks before Christmas, my phone rang at exactly 7 in the morning. Sarah never called that early unless she wanted something, and given the date, I knew exactly what that something would be. I let it ring 3 times before answering, giving myself a moment to prepare for what was coming. "Hi, Mom." Sarah's voice was bright and businesslike, the tone she used when she was about to delegate. "I wanted to catch you before your morning walk. We need to talk about Christmas." I poured myself coffee with my free hand, already knowing where this conversation would lead. "Good morning to you too, sweetheart. How's work?" "Busy, you know how it is. Listen, I've got the final head count for Christmas dinner. It's 19 people this year. Marcus's grandmother is flying in from Florida, and James is bringing his new girlfriend. Her name is Brittany, and she's a lifestyle blogger, so everything needs to be especially Instagram-worthy. 19 people in my 3-bedroom house, with 1 oven and a 65-year-old woman to do all the work. That's quite a crowd," I said, carefully sitting down at my kitchen table with the same notebook I'd been using for over 2 decades. "Oh, you always manage so well," Sarah said dismissively. "Now about the menu. We'll need to accommodate some dietary restrictions. Caroline is still gluten-free, but now she's also doing keto. Brittany is plant-based, but will eat fish. James has decided he's paleo. The kids will only eat chicken nuggets and mac and cheese, you know how they are. And Grandmother Thornton needs everything soft because of her dental work." I wrote mechanically, my pen moving across the page while my mind calculated. Gluten-free and keto meant almond flour everything. Plant-based but pescatarian meant a separate fish dish. Paleo meant no grains, no dairy, no legumes. Soft foods for grandmother. Kid-friendly options, plus the traditional menu the others expected. "Sarah," I began, but she was already continuing. "Patricia specifically requested your prime rib, the one you do with the herb crust. William wants those twice-baked potatoes. Oh, and Marcus mentioned you should make that chocolate torte, the one that takes 2 days. He wants to show it off to Brittany since she blogs about food." I set down my pen and rubbed my temples. The chocolate torte alone required ingredients that would cost $75 and 16 hours of preparation time. "Sarah, have you considered that this might be too much for one person?" "Don't be silly, Mom. You've been doing this for years. Besides, I'll be there to help supervise." Supervise, not help, supervise. "The cost alone for all these specialty ingredients," I started. "Mom, please, it's Christmas. Don't be stingy. What else are you spending money on anyway?" The casual cruelty of that comment hit me like a physical blow. What else was I spending money on? Maybe the mortgage on the house that sheltered her growing up. Maybe the medical bills from the back surgery I needed but kept postponing. Maybe just the simple dignity of not being treated like an ATM and a servant rolled into one. I need to think about this, I said quietly. What's there to think about? Oh, I almost forgot. Brittany has a nut allergy, so absolutely nothing with tree nuts or peanuts. And she'll need to know every ingredient in every dish for her blog. Maybe you could type up recipe cards. That would be so cute. Recipe cards. On top of everything else, I was now expected to provide documentation for my free labor. After Sarah hung up with a breezy, "Thanks, Mom, you're the best," I sat in my kitchen for a long time. The morning sun slanted through the windows, illuminating the scratches on my old wooden table, the worn spots on the linoleum where I'd stood for countless hours cooking for people who saw me as convenient rather than cherished. That afternoon, I had a previously scheduled doctor's appointment. Dr. Martinez had been treating me for chronic back pain that had worsened significantly over the past 5 years. As she examined me, her face grew concerned. "Anne, your inflammation markers are through the roof. Have you been under stress?" I almost laughed. Just preparing for my annual Christmas dinner. 19 people this year. She stopped writing and looked at me over her glasses. 19 people. Are you cooking for 19 people by yourself? "I've done it for 23 years, I said, as if that made it reasonable. "And how's your back pain on a scale of 1 to 10? "About a 7 most days, 9 when I'm on my feet for hours cooking." Dr. Martinez put down her pen and folded her hands. "Anne, I'm going to be direct with you. Your body is telling you it needs rest. The chronic stress, the physical demands you're putting on yourself, they're taking a toll. You're 65, not 35. Have you considered scaling back? Maybe having Christmas catered or asking family to help?" I thought about Sarah's offer to supervise and Patricia's complaints about my stuffing. They have very specific expectations. And what about your expectations? What about your health, Anne? If you don't start putting yourself first, your body is going to make that decision for you and it won't be pleasant. I drove home with a prescription for stronger pain medication and a referral for physical therapy. I knew I wouldn't have time to attend until after the holidays. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed Sarah's BMW already parked there. She had a key and often stopped by when she needed something. I found her in my kitchen on her phone. The speaker was on and I could hear Patricia's cultured voice filling my small space. "The key is to make sure everything is properly documented," Patricia was saying. "Video evidence is best. These lifestyle bloggers eat that stuff up." "Already ahead of you," Sarah replied, and I noticed she was looking at something on her laptop. "I've ordered some discrete cameras. We'll set them up in the kitchen and dining room. Brittany will love having behind-the-scenes footage." "Brilliant. And it'll be amusing to watch your mother bustling around. She does get so flustered when she's cooking for a crowd. Remember last year, when she nearly dropped the turkey?" They both laughed, and I stood frozen in my own hallway listening to my daughter and her mother-in-law plan to secretly film me for their amusement. But Patricia wasn't done. "You know, Sarah, I've been thinking. Your mother's house does provide excellent value. Free venue, free catering, free entertainment, watching her scramble. My country club would charge at least $5,000 for what we get from her for nothing." "I know," Sarah agreed. "And she never complains. Well, hardly ever. She tried to mention the cost today, but I shut that down quickly." "Good. The last thing we need is her getting ideas about her worth. Next thing you know, she'll be expecting contributions or help. Your generation seems to think grandmothers should have lives of their own. Ridiculous notion." I must have made a sound because Sarah's head snapped up. "Mom, is that you?" I walked into my own kitchen, my face carefully neutral. 23 years of hosting had taught me to hide my feelings behind a hostess smile. "Just got back from the doctor. I didn't know you were coming by." "Oh, I just stopped in to—" She glanced at her laptop screen, then quickly closed it. "To check on the Christmas planning. How's it going?" "Fine," I said, moving to put my purse on the counter. My hands were steady despite the rage building inside me. "Though I'm curious about these cameras you mentioned." Sarah's face went through several expressions before settling on defiance. It's just for fun, Mom. Brittany wants to feature a real family Christmas on her blog. Think of the exposure. Exposure, I repeated flatly. How thoughtful. Don't be like that. It's not a big deal. You cook, we film, everyone's happy. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. When had she become this person? When had the little girl who used to help me roll cookie dough transformed into someone who would secretly film her mother for entertainment? I need to start dinner, I said quietly. I'm tired. Sarah gathered her things, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. Okay, well, think about those recipe cards. And Mom, maybe wear something nice for the cooking, for the cameras. After she left, I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. My fingers moved without conscious thought, typing Christmas cruises into the search bar. Pages of options appeared. 7-day Caribbean cruises, gourmet meals, entertainment, people who would serve me for a change. I bookmarked several options, then closed the laptop. In the living room, Frank smiled at me from our wedding photo. What would you do? I asked his image. But I already knew the answer. Frank would have told me to value myself the way I valued others. He would have been appalled at how his daughter was treating me. That night, I found the group text Sarah had been included in. I scrolled back through weeks of messages, each one a little dagger to my heart. Complaints about my cooking jokes, about my dated decorations, speculation about when I'd be too old to host and whether they'd have to pay for a venue then. The final straw was a message from Marcus to his brother. At least the old bird's house is free. Mom wants to charge us each $500 just to use the country club ballroom. Old bird, free house, $500 they'd rather save by using me. I set down my phone and made my decision. They wanted to film me. They wanted documentation. They'd get exactly what they deserved. But first I had preparations to make, and they weren't for Christmas dinner. That night, after discovering their plans to film me, I sat in Frank's old study with my laptop and a cup of chamomile tea. My hands were steady now, my mind crystal clear. If 23 years of teaching had taught me anything, it was that the best lessons were the ones students learned for themselves, and my family was about to get an education they'd never forget. The Caribbean cruise website glowed on my screen. 7 days of pure luxury. Gourmet meals I didn't have to cook. A staff who would treat me like a valued guest instead of free labor. The price for a balcony suite made me wince until I remembered Patricia's comment about the country club charging $5,000. 23 years of free hosting multiplied by 5,000 came to a number that made this cruise look like a bargain. I clicked book now before I could change my mind. December 23rd to December 30th. My first Christmas without cooking, cleaning, or being secretly filmed for someone's amusement. The confirmation email arrived instantly, and I printed it out, folding it carefully and tucking it into my journal. The next morning, I called Sarah with manufactured enthusiasm. I've been thinking about Christmas all night, I said. You're right, 19 people isn't too many. Tell me more about everyone's dietary needs. I want to get this perfect. The surprise in her voice was evident. Oh, well, that's great, Mom. I knew you'd come around. Let me email you the complete list. Within an hour, I had a detailed spreadsheet of requirements that looked like a hospital dietary chart. I studied it carefully, then created my own version, a shopping list so elaborate it could have supplied a small restaurant. Prime beef tenderloin instead of regular prime rib. Organic free-range everything. The specialty flours and alternative ingredients that cost 3 times the regular versions. If they wanted Instagram-worthy, I'd give them a shopping list that screamed luxury. This is perfect, Sarah said when I forwarded it to her. Brittany will be so impressed. Oh, and Mom, maybe we should do a practice run, for the cameras. What a wonderful idea, I replied, my voice honey sweet. Why don't you come over Thursday evening, bring Marcus. I'll show you both where everything will be set up. What followed was 3 weeks of the performance of my lifetime. I threw myself into Christmas planning with an enthusiasm that seemed to delight Sarah and the Thorntons. I sent daily updates to the family group chat discussing menu options with the dedication of a Michelin-starred chef. Patricia responded with increasingly demanding requests, which I accepted with grace. Could we possibly have individual beef Wellingtons instead of prime rib? she texted one evening. I saw it on a cooking show. Of course, I responded, though that will require 6 hours of preparation. I'll start at 3 in the morning to have them ready by dinner. You're a treasure, Anne, she replied, missing the absurdity entirely. Thursday evening, Sarah and Marcus arrived with a small box. I watched from the kitchen as they installed tiny cameras in my light fixtures and on top of my china cabinet. They thought they were being subtle, but a lifetime of watching students try to cheat had made me an expert at spotting deception. The quality is amazing, Marcus said, checking his phone. We'll be able to see everything. Just act natural, Mom, Sarah called out. Pretend the cameras aren't there. Oh, I intended to give them a show they'd never forget. I began my performance immediately pulling out my massive binder of recipes and spreading papers across the dining room table where I knew the cameras could capture everything. Now let's see, I muttered loud enough to be recorded. Individual Wellingtons means 6 pounds of tenderloin at $38 a pound. Marcus actually looked up from his phone. $38 a pound. Oh yes, I said innocently. Patricia specified grass-fed, organic, locally sourced. That's the going rate. Plus the puff pastry, the mushroom duxelles with truffle oil, the pâté. Each Wellington will cost about $45 to make. I watched him do the math in his head. 19 people at $45 each. His face paled slightly, but he said nothing. After all, it wasn't his money. For 3 weeks, I maintained the charade. I visited specialty stores, posting photos of exotic ingredients to the family chat. I created detailed prep schedules that I hung on my refrigerator, knowing the cameras would capture them. 17 pages of minute-by-minute planning that would make a wedding coordinator weep. Meanwhile, I was making other arrangements. My friend Dorothy from church had always spent Christmas alone since her children lived overseas. When I asked if she'd like to house sit, her face lit up. Are you sure, Anne? What about your family dinner? Let's just say there's been a change of plans, I told her. I need someone here starting December 23rd, someone I trust. I gave her a detailed tour of the house, showing her where everything was kept. Most importantly, I showed her my preparation binder, complete with the ludicrously complicated recipes and impossible timeline. This is what they're expecting, Dorothy asked, flipping through pages of instructions for homemade croissants and hand-pulled mozzarella. Every bit of it, I confirmed. Of course, the kitchen will be fully stocked with ingredients. I didn't mention that those ingredients would be the basic, not the premium versions they were expecting. 2 weeks before Christmas, I made another discovery. While looking for my heating pad in Sarah's old room, now her office, when she visited, I found a folder marked Mom Estate Planning. Inside were legal documents with my signature, except I'd never signed them. My hands trembled as I read through power of attorney forms healthcare directives, and most chilling, a document suggesting I showed signs of diminished capacity. The date on the forms was 3 months in the future. They weren't just planning to film me, they were planning to take control of everything Frank and I had built. I photographed every page with my phone, then carefully replaced the folder. That evening, I called my own lawyer, Tom Morrison, who'd handled Frank's estate. Anne, these are serious allegations, he said after I explained. Forged signatures planning to claim diminished capacity. Do you have evidence? I have photos of the documents, and Tom, there's more. I told him about the cameras, the mocking messages, the 23 years of free labor. My God, he said quietly, your own daughter. I'm afraid so. I need to protect myself. What can we do? First, we update your will immediately. Second, we document everything. Third, we make sure nothing can be accessed without your explicit witnessed consent. Can you come in tomorrow? I spent the next morning in Tom's office creating ironclad protections for my assets. He also had news for me. Anne, I did some checking. Sarah's already tried to access some of your accounts. The bank flagged it and called me since I'm listed as your attorney. She claimed you'd given her permission to handle your finances. The betrayal cut deep, but it also strengthened my resolve. What did you tell them? That any changes would come directly from me with your witness signature. Anne, I think you should consider filing charges. After Christmas, I said, I want them to learn a different lesson first. The final week before Christmas, I gave the performance of my life. I filled my refrigerator with basic ingredients, the kinds of things any cook would have on hand: eggs, butter, flour, standard vegetables. I left detailed notes about where to find the specialty items, all of which existed only in my imagination. I typed up a 20-page hosting guide with recipes that looked impressive, but were missing crucial steps. How to make beef Wellington without mentioning the need to seal the meat. Croissant instructions that left out the folding technique. A chocolate torte recipe that forgot to mention tempering. Sarah called daily with new requests, each of which I accepted graciously. Could you also make a gingerbread house? Brittany wants to film the kids decorating it. Of course, dear. I'll have all the pieces baked and ready for assembly. I bought a gingerbread house kit, removed all the pieces from the box, and left them in unmarked containers. Let them figure out which piece was the roof and which was the wall. December 22nd arrived with a fresh snowfall that made everything look like a Christmas card. I packed my suitcase, methodically choosing my best clothes, the ones I never wore because I was always in the kitchen. My passport, my cruise documents, and my cousin's phone number in Florida all went into my carry-on. Dorothy arrived that evening for a final briefing. I handed her an envelope with her house-sitting payment and a second envelope marked, "For Sarah, open December 24th. "What's in it?" she asked. "The truth," I said simply. Every screenshot, every photo, every bit of evidence of what they've been planning. And a simple message: the free ride is over. That night, I performed one last scene for the cameras. I stood in my kitchen checking my prep list, talking to myself about tomorrow's early start. 3 a.m. for the Wellingtons. The croissants need to proof. The torte should be perfect by now. I went to bed early, setting my alarm for 4 a.m., but I wouldn't be waking up to cook. I'd be heading to the airport while my family discovered that their free venue, free catering, and free entertainment had just canceled their reservation. The 2 weeks following my discovery of Sarah's legal documents were the most educational of my life. I'd spent 40 years in classrooms, but nothing had taught me as much as learning to protect myself from my own family. Every interaction became an opportunity to gather evidence, every conversation a chance to document their true intentions. I started with a small digital recorder I bought with cash from an electronics store 2 towns over. No credit card trail, no questions asked. It fit perfectly in my pocket, and I tested it extensively to ensure it would pick up clear audio. Connecticut was a one-party consent state for recordings, meaning I could legally record any conversation I was part of. Tom Morrison had confirmed this, adding that given the circumstances, the recordings would be admissible if needed. The first opportunity came sooner than expected. Sarah stopped by 3 days after I'd found the forged documents, ostensibly to discuss tablecloth colors. "I'm thinking ivory instead of white," she said, spreading fabric samples on my kitchen table. "White is so stark, don't you think?" I fingered the expensive fabric, the recorder running in my pocket. "These are beautiful. Must have cost a fortune." "Oh, about $300 for the set," she said casually. "But you know Brittany needs everything perfect for her photos. I'll leave the invoice on the counter. You can reimburse me whenever." $300 for tablecloths. For 1 day. I kept my voice level. "Of course. Sarah, I've been meaning to ask, how's that estate planning going? You mentioned you were updating your own will." Her eyes sharpened. "Why do you ask?" "Oh, just thinking I should update mine too. Make sure everything's in order." "Don't worry about that, Mom," she said, her voice taking on that dismissive tone I'd grown to hate. "I can handle all that for you. In fact, I've already started some paperwork. You know, just in case." "In case of what?" "Well, you're not getting younger. And with Dad gone, someone needs to look after your interests." "That's thoughtful," I said, my stomach churning. "What kind of paperwork?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Just standard stuff. Power of attorney, healthcare directives. Nothing you need to worry about. I used your signature from those birthday cards you signed for the kids. Saves you a trip to the lawyer." There it was. Recorded admission of forgery. I kept my face neutral, 40 years of parent-teacher conferences serving me well. How efficient of you. The next revelation came when I visited Sarah's house to drop off some serving platters she'd requested. Marcus was in his study on a video call, the door slightly open. I paused in the hallway, ostensibly admiring their family photos, while the recorder captured every word. "The house alone is worth $450, maybe $5 with the market," he was saying. "And she's sitting on at least $200 in savings plus Frank's life insurance. We're looking at close to $800,000 total. And your wife is on board." The voice from the computer was unfamiliar. "Sarah's handling the paperwork. Her mother trusts her completely. By February, we'll have full control. The old lady won't even know what hit her." Old lady. I was the old lady whose house he was already spending. I moved away silently, my hands steady despite my rage. In their living room, I found something else interesting. My grandmother's pearl necklace, the one I thought I'd misplaced last Christmas, was displayed in Sarah's jewelry box, clearly visible through the glass top. I photographed it with my phone, making sure to capture the distinctive clasp Frank had repaired for our anniversary. That evening, I made a list of other items that had mysteriously disappeared over the years. Frank's pocket watch, a set of silver candlesticks, first edition books from his collection. All things I'd assumed were misplaced in my grief and distraction. Now I wondered. The most damning evidence came during a family dinner at Patricia's house. I'd been invited, a rare occurrence that should have made me suspicious. After dinner, while I was helping clear plates despite being a guest, I overheard Patricia in the study with her eldest son, James. "Marcus says February at the latest," Patricia was saying. "Once Sarah has power of attorney, they can sell that little house and put Anne somewhere more appropriate." "Appropriate?" James laughed. "You mean cheap?" "Well, she doesn't need much. A small apartment, maybe assisted living eventually. The house money will cover it, and the rest—" She trailed off meaningfully. "Clever, and she has no idea." "None. She's too busy planning Christmas to notice anything. Sarah's been brilliant keeping her distracted with all these ridiculous requests. Individual beef Wellingtons." They both laughed. I recorded it all, then excused myself to the bathroom where I sat on the closed toilet lid, shaking with fury. They weren't just planning to steal from me. They were planning to dispose of me, to stick me in some cut-rate facility while they enjoyed the fruits of my life's work. The next morning, I called Tom Morrison and played him the recordings. The silence on his end stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. "Anne," he finally said, "this is criminal conspiracy. Fraud, elder abuse, forgery. We need to involve the police." "Not yet," I said firmly. "I want more evidence, and I want them to learn a lesson they'll never forget." "Anne, I can't advise you to—" "You're not advising me to do anything," I interrupted. "You're simply holding on to these recordings and documents for safekeeping. If anything happens to me, you know what to do." He sighed. "You're playing a dangerous game." "No," I corrected him. "They're playing a dangerous game. I'm just changing the rules." Over the next week, I became a detective in my own life. I found receipts in Sarah's desk showing she'd been using my credit card for luxury purchases, small enough not to trigger alerts, but adding up to thousands over the years. I discovered Marcus had convinced Frank to sign documents before his death documents that gave Marcus advisory control over some investments. Investments that had mysteriously lost money while Marcus's portfolio grew. Each piece of evidence was photographed, documented, backed up in multiple locations. I opened a safety deposit box at a bank Sarah didn't know about storing copies of everything. Tom Morrison got a set. My cousin in Florida got a set. If anything happened to me, the evidence would surface like a tidal wave. The most satisfying discovery came by accident. While pretending to look for wrapping paper in Sarah's basement, I found boxes of my things. The missing books, Frank's watch, even photo albums I thought were lost. They'd been systematically stealing from me for years, probably planning to claim I'd given them these things if I ever noticed. I photographed everything, then left it all exactly as I found it. Let them think they were safe. Let them believe their secret was secure. Patricia called that evening with yet another demand. "Anne, I've been thinking. We should have place cards this year. Handwritten, of course. Calligraphy would be nice." "Of course," I agreed sweetly, adding calligraphy supplies to my imaginary shopping list. "Anything else?" "Well, since you mentioned it, individual desserts might be nicer than cutting pies. Perhaps chocolate soufflés. They're so elegant. Chocolate soufflés that had to be timed perfectly and served immediately for 19 people with one oven. What a wonderful idea, I gushed. I'll practice this week to make sure they're perfect. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table with my evidence spread before me. 23 years of my life reduced to receipts, recordings, and stolen treasures. But also 23 years of strength I didn't know I had. They thought I was weak, controllable, disposable. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. I picked up my phone and opened the cruise app, checking my booking one more time. Balcony Suite Deck 8, all meals included. While they were discovering their free ride had ended, I'd be sipping champagne and watching the sunset over the Caribbean. Dorothy stopped by that evening for coffee and final instructions. I showed her the evidence file explaining what to do if anything went wrong. "My word," she breathed, looking through the photos. "Your own daughter?" "My own daughter," I confirmed. "But you know what Frank used to say? The best lessons are the ones that cost you something to learn." "What's this going to cost them?" I smiled, thinking of their Christmas morning discoveries. Everything they thought they'd already stolen. December 22nd dawned crisp and bright, one of those perfect winter mornings that made the world look like a snow globe. I woke at 4:30, not from nerves, but from anticipation. Today was Independence Day, my personal revolution against 23 years of servitude. My suitcase stood ready by the door, packed with clothes I'd never worn to family gatherings because I was always hidden in the kitchen. A silk dress for formal night on the cruise, comfortable sandals for walking the deck, a swimsuit that hadn't seen daylight since Frank passed. Today, Anne the servant was retiring, and Anne the woman was taking her place. I moved through my morning routine with practiced calm, aware that the cameras were recording. I made coffee, checked my preparation binder one last time for show, and even mumbled about the busy day ahead. Let them think I was anxious about cooking. The only thing I was anxious about was airport traffic. By noon, I'd completed my final performance. The refrigerator was stocked with basic ingredients. Nothing fancy, just eggs, milk, butter, and standard vegetables. The specialty items they were expecting existed only in receipts I'd created and shopping lists I'd shared. $38 per pound beef. That was regular ground chuck, repackaged in butcher paper with a handwritten label. The exotic spices and truffle oil, regular seasonings transferred to fancy containers I'd bought at the dollar store. I'd left detailed notes everywhere, each more absurd than the last. Instructions for the chocolate soufflé that required them to maintain exactly 68.5 degrees Fahrenheit in the kitchen. A reminder that the beef Wellington dough needed to be rolled counterclockwise under a full moon. Bread that required someone to whisper encouragement to it while it rose. If they wanted to film me looking foolish, I'd give them instructions that would make them look like fools trying to follow them. Dorothy arrived at 2 o'clock sharp, bless her punctual heart. I handed her the keys and gave her the grand tour one more time, pointing out where I'd left everything. "Now remember," I said loud enough for the cameras, "all the specialty ingredients are in the pantry, labeled and ready. The preparation schedule is on the refrigerator. Everything they need is right here." Dorothy nodded, playing along beautifully. "Don't you worry about a thing. I'll take good care of the house." I hugged her, slipping the envelope marked "For Sarah" into her hands. "Give this to my daughter on Christmas Eve, not before." "You can count on me," she whispered back. At 3 o'clock, I performed my final scene. I stood in the kitchen, checking off items on my list, talking to myself about tomorrow's early start. Beef Wellington at 4 a.m., soufflé prep at noon. Croissants need their third folding at exactly 6:17. Then I headed to my bedroom ostensibly for an early night before the big day. In reality, I grabbed my hidden suitcase and slipped out the back door to the garage. My car was already loaded with everything I needed. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw the curtains twitch at Mrs. Henderson's house next door. Good. Let her gossip about seeing me leave. By the time anyone put the pieces together, I'd be 30,000 feet in the air. The drive to the airport was surreal. 23 years of Christmas Eve drives had always been to grocery stores for last-minute ingredients to Patricia's house, to drop off prepared dishes to Sarah's, to help with gift wrapping she'd left too late. This year, I was driving toward freedom. I parked in long-term parking, adding that receipt to my evidence file. Let them wonder why I'd needed airport parking on December 22nd. Inside the terminal, I checked in for my flight, the agent's cheerful, "Traveling for the holidays," met with my first genuine smile in weeks. "Yes," I said, "I'm going home." Security was a breeze at that hour. I had time for a leisurely dinner at an airport restaurant, ordering whatever I wanted without calculating if I'd have enough money left for Christmas groceries. The salmon was excellent, the wine better, and the solitude best of all. As I sat at the gate waiting to board, my phone began its predictable symphony. Sarah, first a casual, "Hey Mom, just checking on tomorrow's prep," text that I ignored. Then Marcus, unusual since he rarely contacted me directly, asking about parking arrangements for extra cars. Patricia chimed in with a reminder about the souffle timing. I turned off read receipts earlier that week so they couldn't even tell if I'd seen their messages. Boarding began, and I switched my phone to airplane mode with deep satisfaction. First class, because why not? If they could spend my money on their schemes, I could spend it on my comfort. The flight attendant offered me champagne before takeoff, and I accepted with a smile that must have been contagious because she grinned back. "Celebrating?" she asked. "My independence," I replied, raising my glass slightly. As the plane lifted off, I watched the lights of Connecticut fade below. Somewhere down there, my family was settling in for their evening, confident that tomorrow their servant would rise at dawn to create their perfect Christmas. Sarah was probably reviewing her camera angles. Marcus was likely calculating my net worth again. Patricia was almost certainly making lists of additional demands to text me in the morning. Dorothy would be settling into the guest room now, my instruction binder prominently displayed where the cameras could see it. The envelope for Sarah safely hidden until Christmas Eve. Inside that envelope was everything: copies of the forged documents, transcripts of the recorded conversations, photographs of stolen items, receipts for fraudulent charges, and a simple note in my handwriting. "For 23 years, I gave you my love disguised as service. You saw only the service and took the love for granted. This year, I give you the gift of truth. The cameras you installed have recorded nothing but empty rooms and Dorothy's confusion. The elaborate feast you demanded exists only in your imagination. The servant you mocked has set herself free. Merry Christmas, Anne. P.S. Tom Morrison has copies of everything. I suggest you contact your lawyer." I dozed fitfully on the flight, waking as we descended into Fort Lauderdale. The warm air hit me like a blessing as I exited the terminal. No snow, no ice, no bitter wind demanding I return to a hot kitchen. Just palm trees and possibility. The cruise terminal was bustling with excited travelers. As I checked in, the agent noticed my solo status. "Traveling alone for the holidays." "Traveling free for the holidays," I corrected, and she laughed. "Good for you. You're upgraded to a suite on deck 10. Better balcony view." The ship was magnificent, a floating palace where I was guest, not servant. My suite was larger than my kitchen at home, with a balcony overlooking the ocean and a bed I wouldn't have to leave at dawn to cook for ungrateful relatives. As the ship pulled away from port, I stood on deck, watching the shoreline recede. My phone, still on airplane mode, showed 47 missed calls. I considered throwing it into the ocean, but decided that was too dramatic. Instead, I turned it off completely and locked it in the safe. For 7 days, I would be unreachable, unfindable, and utterly free. That first evening, I dressed for dinner in the silk dress I'd bought specifically for this moment. The restaurant was elegant, the food exquisite, and I didn't have to cook, serve, or clean a single thing. When the waiter asked if I was dining alone, I smiled. "No," I said. "I'm dining with freedom." He didn't understand, but he smiled back. "Enjoy your meal, madam, and Merry Christmas." "The merriest?" I agreed, raising my glass of wine to toast myself, the ocean, and the beautiful catastrophe that was about to unfold in my kitchen 3,000 miles away. While I was savoring lobster thermidor in the ship's elegant dining room, my phone locked safely away in my suite. The Thornton family Christmas was beginning its spectacular collapse 3,000 miles away in Connecticut. According to Dorothy's detailed account, which she gleefully shared when I returned, the first signs of trouble began at 7 a.m. on December 23rd when Sarah arrived at my house. She'd come early to supervise and ensure everything was ready for the camera footage. What she found was Dorothy in my kitchen, calmly drinking coffee and reading the morning paper. "Who are you?" Sarah demanded, her key still in the door lock. "Dorothy Winters. I'm house-sitting for Anne. You must be Sarah." Dorothy's tone was perfectly pleasant, which apparently made everything worse. "House-sitting? What do you mean, house-sitting? Where's my mother?" Dorothy gestured to the preparation binder on the counter, the same one with 20 pages of impossible instructions. "She left this for you, said you'd know what to do. I'm just here to watch the house." Sarah's frantic phone calls to me began immediately, followed by texts that grew increasingly panicked. "Mom, where are you? This isn't funny. We have 19 people coming." All met with the silence of my powered-off phone in a cruise ship's safe. Marcus arrived within the hour, followed by Patricia in her fur coat despite the mild weather. They stood in my kitchen like generals surveying a battlefield, the cameras they'd installed, recording every moment of their mounting panic. "Check the refrigerator," Patricia ordered, and Sarah yanked it open to reveal basic ingredients that wouldn't create anything close to the elaborate feast they'd ordered. "Where's the beef Wellington ingredients, the truffle oil, the organic vegetables?" Sarah's voice pitched higher with each missing item. Dorothy, still calmly drinking her coffee, pointed to the preparation binder. "Anne said everything you need to know is in there." They descended on the binder like vultures, only to find my masterpiece of malicious compliance. The beef Wellington recipe called for moonlight-blessed dough. The soufflé instructions required maintaining exact humidity levels. The croissant recipe insisted on folding the dough while humming Beethoven's Fifth Symphony in B-flat. "This is insane," Marcus muttered, flipping through pages. "No one can follow this." "Oh," Dorothy said innocently. "Anne mentioned she'd been perfecting these recipes for weeks, said you specifically requested everything be extra special for the lifestyle blogger." Patricia snatched the binder, her perfectly manicured nails flipping through pages with increasing desperation. "This has to be a joke. Where are the real recipes?" "Those are the ones she left." Dorothy shrugged. "Though she did mention something about the cameras being able to capture the whole process. Are you filming now?" The color drained from Sarah's face as she realized the cameras were indeed had been recording since they walked in. Recording their panic, their anger, their complete inability to produce the feast they'd demanded. By noon, the situation had deteriorated into full chaos. Patricia had attempted to take charge, sending Marcus to 3 different specialty stores, looking for ingredients. He returned empty-handed and furious, having discovered that specialty stores were either closed for the holidays or had sold out of everything. $300 for tablecloths, he raged at Sarah. "But you couldn't be bothered to check if we had actual food." Sarah was frantically calling catering companies, only to be laughed at when she explained she needed a full feast for 19 people with dietary restrictions with less than 24 hours' notice. The few who didn't hang up immediately quoted prices that made Marcus turn purple. $15,000, he shouted after the third quote. "That's insane." "It's Christmas Eve," Sarah snapped back. "What did you expect?" The extended family began arriving for what they thought would be preparation day, only to find the kitchen in chaos. James and his lifestyle blogger girlfriend Brittany walked into what looked like a war zone, with Patricia attempting to follow my soufflé recipe while Sarah argued with Marcus about whose fault this was. "Where's Anne?" Brittany asked, her phone already out, to document what she clearly thought would be festive preparations. "On vacation," Dorothy supplied helpfully. "She left last night, said you were in charge, Sarah." The word vacation rippled through the family like a stone thrown in still water. Voices raised in disbelief, then anger, then accusation. The cameras captured it all. Patricia calling Sarah incompetent, Marcus blaming his mother for the excessive demands, James suggesting they just order pizza, which earned him a glass of wine thrown in his direction by his mother. Caroline arrived with her gluten-free keto family to find her brothers squared off in my dining room, while their mother sat at the kitchen table, her fur coat still on, alternating between rage and tears. "This is all your fault," Patricia pointed at Sarah. "You said she'd never leave. You said she was too stupid to stand up for herself." "I never said stupid," Sarah protested, but the damage was done. "No." Marcus jumped in. "You said simple and manageable, and my personal favorite, too old to change." Dorothy, who'd been quietly knitting in the corner this whole time, chose that moment to speak up. "Oh, that reminds me. Anne left an envelope for you, Sarah. She said to give it to you on Christmas Eve, but given the circumstances..." She handed over the envelope. I'd prepared, the one with everything. The forged documents, the recorded conversations, the photographs of stolen items, 23 years of evidence of their treatment of me, all neatly organized with a cover letter explaining exactly what they'd been planning and exactly what I thought of it. Sarah's hands shook as she read, her face cycling through white, red, and a concerning shade of green. "She knows," she whispered. "Knows what?" Patricia demanded, snatching the papers. Her reading was accompanied by gasps, then silence, then a shriek that probably startled my neighbors. "She recorded us. She photographed everything. This is evidence," Dorothy supplied helpfully. "I believe that's the legal term." Marcus grabbed the papers, next his expression darkening as he read about the forged power of attorney, the plans to sell my house, the systematic theft over the years. "Sarah, tell me you didn't actually forge her signature." Sarah's silence was answer enough. "We could go to prison," James said, reading over Marcus's shoulder. "This is fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy." "She wouldn't," Patricia said, but her voice lacked conviction. "She's too..." "Too what?" Dorothy asked sweetly. "Too simple, too manageable, too old to change." The family turned on each other like sharks scenting blood. Marcus accused Sarah of jeopardizing his career. Patricia blamed Marcus for marrying someone who couldn't control her mother. Caroline announced she was leaving before she became implicated. James's girlfriend was live streaming the meltdown until someone noticed, and several family members lunged for her phone. By evening, the house was empty except for Dorothy and the cameras still faithfully recording. The Thorntons had fled to various hotels and restaurants, their Christmas dinner consisting of whatever they could find open on December 23rd. The elaborate feast they'd demanded existed only in their imaginations and my impossible instruction manual. Dorothy later told me she'd stayed until December 26th, fielding increasingly desperate calls from Sarah, first demanding I return, then pleading, then threatening, then begging. The progression was as predictable as it was satisfying. "Please," Sarah had sobbed on Christmas morning, calling Dorothy when she couldn't reach me. "Just tell me where she is. I need to apologize. I need to explain." "I don't know where she is," Dorothy said truthfully, "but I do know she's somewhere warm being served instead of serving. Seems fitting, don't you think?" The cameras still running captured one final scene. Patricia returning on Christmas Day alone, standing in my empty kitchen. She looked older somehow, her perfect facade cracked. She spoke to the empty room, perhaps forgetting the cameras were there. "Anne, if you're watching this somehow, I'm sorry. We took you for granted. We took everything for granted." She paused, then added with a bitter laugh, "Merry Christmas, I suppose." Meanwhile, on my cruise ship, I was having the most magnificent Christmas of my life. I attended a dawn service in the ship's chapel, not because I had to set up chairs or prepare refreshments, but simply because I wanted to. Breakfast was a buffet that someone else had prepared. Lunch was by the pool. Dinner was formal with multiple courses I didn't cook, served on plates I didn't have to wash. I made friends with other travelers, many of them women who'd also decided this year to choose themselves. We toasted our freedom with champagne and shared stories of holidays past and future. When they asked about my family, I told them the truth. "They're learning to cook," I said, which wasn't a lie. They were certainly learning something. I returned from my Caribbean cruise on December 30th, tanned, rested, and 20 pounds lighter from the stress I'd left in international waters. The taxi driver who picked me up from the airport whistled when he saw my address. "Coming home from vacation?" he asked. "Coming home from liberation," I corrected, and he laughed, though he probably didn't understand. My house looked exactly as I'd left it thanks to Dorothy's careful tending. She'd even left fresh flowers on the kitchen table with a note, "Welcome home, Warrior Teen D." The stack of mail was considerable, mostly Christmas cards from friends who had no idea about the drama, but also several certified letters I'd been expecting. The first was from Marcus's lawyer threatening legal action if I proceeded with any fraud charges. The second was from Tom Morrison, my own attorney, informing Marcus's lawyer that we had extensive documentation and would be happy to proceed with both civil and criminal cases. The third, surprisingly, was from Patricia, handwritten on her monogrammed stationery. I made myself tea and sat down to read Patricia's letter properly. Her usually perfect penmanship was shaky, the words carefully chosen. "Anne, I have spent 73 years believing that dignity came from position, that worth was measured in bank accounts and bloodlines. You have taught me in the most humiliating way possible that I was wrong. I have been a fool, and worse, a cruel fool. I do not ask for forgiveness because I do not deserve it. I only ask that you know I am sorry for everything. Patricia." I set the letter aside and turned on my phone for the first time in 7 days. The screen lit up with hundreds of notifications. I deleted them all without reading and blocked every Thornton family number except Sarah's. She deserved the chance to speak even if I chose not to answer. The doorbell rang that afternoon. I knew who it would be before I opened it. Sarah stood on my doorstep looking like she'd aged 5 years in a week. No designer clothes, no perfect makeup, just my daughter looking lost and small. "May I come in?" She asked, her voice nothing like the confident lawyer who'd commanded me just weeks ago. I stepped aside without a word. She followed me to the kitchen, sitting in the same chair she'd occupied while planning to steal my life. I didn't offer tea. "I need to say something," she began, then stopped staring at her hands. "I don't know how to start." "Try the truth," I suggested. "It's been rare enough between us." She flinched but nodded. "I became someone I don't recognize. Somewhere between law school and the Thornton dining table, I lost myself. I lost the mother who raised me, who taught me kindness and honesty. I became them." "You became worse than them," I corrected. "They at least weren't betraying their own mother." Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't comfort her. Comfort was for people who hadn't forged your signature on documents meant to lock you away. "Marcus left me," she said quietly. "The day after Christmas. Said I'd humiliated his family beyond repair. His mother won't speak to him. The partners at the firm suggested he take a leave of absence until the scandal dies down. He blames me for everything." "Good," I said simply. Sarah looked up, surprised by my harshness. "Mom, I know you're angry." "Angry." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Sarah, I'm not angry. Anger would mean I still expected better from you. I'm done. I'm done being the mother who forgives everything, who makes excuses, who enables your worst behavior by cushioning you from consequences." "What do you want me to do?" she whispered. "I want you to grow up," I said. "For the first time in your 42 years, I want you to face what you've done without Mommy cleaning up your mess." I pulled out a folder Tom Morrison had prepared and slid it across the table. "These are my terms. First, you'll return every item you've stolen over the years. I have a complete inventory. Second, you'll pay back every dollar you've taken with interest. Third, you'll cover my legal fees for protecting myself from you. Fourth, you'll write a letter to every family member who participated in your scheme, acknowledging what you did and exonerating me of any fault." Sarah read through the documents, her face paling at the total. This is everything I have saved." "Then you'll understand what it feels like to start over," I said. "I did it after your father died while you were stealing from me." "And if I do all this," she asked, "then maybe someday we can begin rebuilding a relationship based on respect instead of exploitation. But Sarah, understand this, I will never again be the mother you remember. That woman served her last meal on December 22nd. Sarah signed the documents with shaking hands. As she prepared to leave, she turned back one more time. "The cruise? Were you happy?" For the first time since she'd arrived, I smiled genuinely. I was free. For 7 days, I was just Anne. Not mom, not grandma, not the holiday servant. Just a woman enjoying her life. It was magnificent. She nodded, tears fresh on her cheeks. "I'm glad. Despite everything, I'm glad you got that." After she left, I sat in my quiet kitchen, the same kitchen that had seen so many years of thankless labor. But it felt different now. I felt different. The woman who had cooked for armies while being mocked was gone. In her place sat someone who knew her worth and demanded others recognize it too. Over the following weeks, the Thorntons gradually returned the items they'd stolen. Frank's watch appeared on my doorstep with no note. The first edition books materialized in a box by my garage. My grandmother's necklace came via courier. Each return was an admission of guilt, each item a small victory. Sarah kept her word, paying back everything with money from her divorce settlement. The irony wasn't lost on either of us that Marcus's money was funding her restitution. She sent the letters I'd demanded, and apparently they caused quite a stir. James called to apologize, saying Brittany had left him after learning the full truth. Caroline sent a fruit basket with a card that said simply, "We were horrible. You deserved better." But it was Patricia who surprised me most. She appeared at my door on a random Tuesday in February, looking nothing like the fur-coated matriarch I'd known. She wore a simple wool coat and sensible shoes, her face bare of its usual heavy makeup. "I won't stay long," she said. "I just needed to tell you in person. I've been seeing a therapist. She says I have a lot of work to do on myself. A lifetime of work, probably." I remained silent, letting her speak. "I treated you abominably," she continued. "I saw your kindness as weakness, your generosity as something to exploit. I turned my son into someone just like me, and that cost him his marriage. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just telling you that you've changed me. What you did last Christmas, it was the mirror I needed to see myself clearly." She left without asking to come in, which showed more growth than any apology could have. As winter turned to spring, I rebuilt my life on my own terms. I joined a cruise club planning future adventures. I volunteered at the community center teaching cooking to people who actually appreciated it. I made friends who saw me as Anne, not as someone's mother or grandmother or unpaid servant. Sarah and I began meeting for coffee once a month. Neutral ground, neutral expectations. She was living in a small apartment working at a legal aid clinic instead of the prestigious family firm. The work paid less but seemed to be teaching her more about humanity than all her years with the Thorntons had. "I cooked dinner last night," she told me one afternoon in May. "Just spaghetti, nothing fancy. But I made it myself, ate it alone at my small table, and washed my own dishes. And I thought of you." Why, I asked. Because for the first time, I understood the gift in those simple acts, the dignity in taking care of yourself and others without expecting praise or reward. You tried to teach me that my whole life, and I missed it completely. "You're learning it now," I said. "That's what matters." By the next Christmas, everything had changed. I sent out a family email in November with a simple message. "I'll be on a cruise from December 20th through January 2nd. Merry Christmas to all." Sarah called immediately. Would you consider having coffee with me before you go? Just coffee. I'm not asking for anything else." We met on December 19th. She gave me a small wrapped box and waited nervously while I opened it. Inside was a simple silver bracelet with a compass charm. "So you always find your way," she explained. "And so I remember that you showed me how to find mine." I wore that bracelet on my second Christmas cruise, this time to Alaska, to see the northern lights. As I stood on the deck watching the ethereal colors dance across the sky, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The pain of betrayal, the courage to stand up for myself, the slow path towards something that might someday be forgiveness. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Merry Christmas, Mom. I'm cooking for myself tonight. Thank you for teaching me how." I smiled and put the phone away, returning my attention to the lights. The greatest gift I'd given my family wasn't any feast or perfectly decorated table. It was the gift of consequences of growth of learning that love isn't measured in service, but in respect. The northern lights shimmered and danced, and I danced a little too, there on the deck of a ship going nowhere and everywhere at once. I was 66 years old, financially secure, legally protected, and finally blessedly free. Some might say I'd lost my family that Christmas when I chose myself, but I knew better. I'd lost the users, the takers, the ones who saw me as convenience rather than person. What I'd gained was worth so much more self-respect boundaries and the knowledge that it's never too late to teach people how to treat you, even if that lesson comes wrapped in canceled Christmas plans and a Caribbean cruise. The lights faded eventually, as all beautiful things do, but I remained on deck, breathing in the cold air that felt like freedom. Tomorrow would bring new ports, new adventures, new chances to live for myself. And back home, my family would be living with the choices they'd made, the lessons they'd learned, the mother and grandmother who'd finally said, enough. That was my gift to them and to myself, the gift of truth, consequences, and the hardest love of all the kind that says, I love you enough to let you fail, to let you grow, to let you become better than you were. Merry Christmas indeed. Dear friends, as you've heard my story, I wonder, have you ever reached a breaking point where you had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your self-respect? What would you have done in my shoes? And more importantly, what boundaries do you need to set in your own life? If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to comment below with your own thoughts or experiences. Like this video if you believe everyone deserves to be valued for who they are, not what they do for others. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about finding strength, setting boundaries, and choosing yourself. And please share this with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to demand the respect they deserve. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember, you are not anyone's servant unless you choose to be. You are worthy of love, respect, and the occasional Caribbean cruise. May your holidays be filled with people who see your worth, and may you always have the courage to walk away from those who don't. Wishing you strength, wisdom, and the very merriest of Christmases on your own terms.